I request to add one point to the political structure, which I forgot. It's not one party system in Islam, multiple party system. But the manifestos of all the parties will be screened, that none of the manifestos contains anything against the injunctions of the Quran and the Sunnah. But there can be different parties, they can have different outlooks on taxation, they can have different outlook on the provincial authority and the central authority, and they can have different these things. Whichever is permissible and mubah, not haram, not proved to be forbidden, they can include. But it has to be screened. Or somebody can go to the court, just like, if a piece of legislation has been passed by the legislature, I have the right to go and knock the door of the higher judiciary that this is against Islam, this is against the Quran and the Sunnah, in the same way.
Ahmad has almost very barely and schematically stated the essentials of two very important areas of corporate life, our political system and economic system. And he has studied his normative point of view, of course, gleaned from Quran and Sunnah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We have heard Dr. Israr Ahmad's presentation on two very sensitive issues, the political system of Islam and the economic system of Islam. The two areas are very sensitive. One of us has his own sensibilities, coming from different cultures, of course, different mindset. We may have different ideas, but Dr. Israr Ahmad is essentially representing Quran and Hadith. That is his normative point of view. Now, for interaction, I would first request Dr. Norton.
I have listened attentively to what you've said, and I feel obligated as a proud Jew, let me say, who believes in Judaism, but perhaps even more importantly, as an open-minded and I hope compassionate human being, and as an advocate of democracy, I really feel that I must make a brief, respectful, but also frank comment that you may answer if you wish. Now, for much of my life in my teaching, writing, and human rights activity, I have struggled against the Jewish exclusivity of the State of Israel, made so by its Zionist character. As a number of great Jewish thinkers have argued in the past, and do argue today, this exclusivity is in opposition to basic human values in Judaism. This state incorrectly presumes to speak for all the Jews of the world. This state is an exclusivist one because it grants rights and privileges by law to Jews, not granted to non-Jews. The state has also oppressed the indigenous Palestinian population in order to maintain itself as a Zionist state. Here is the heart center of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. As I already stated, I have opposed and do oppose the exclusivist state of Israel, just as I oppose other types of exclusivist states based upon race, color, and or religion. I have witnessed in the past decade especially growing numbers of Jews who, although still a minority, agree with the position that I have. This minority includes both religious and secular Jews. The religious Jews, by the way, believe that today the Torah is valid, alive, and is correctly the Word of God, just as you believe the same for the Quran. They, by the way, would be surprised, as frankly was I, if they heard or read some of your interpretations of Judaism that they consider to be factually incorrect, such as your comments yesterday about Torah following the destruction of the first temple in 586 before the Common Era, the meaning of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and your written comment in this pamphlet about Jews believing they are exempt from punishment by God on the Day of Judgment, which, according to Judaism, is not correct. The Jews, religious and secular, who believe, as do I, about exclusivist states, obviously reject your advocacy of an Islamic state in Israel or anywhere else in which non-Jews and others do not have all the same human rights, including all of the political rights, that includes the right to vote as well, as do Muslims. Those Jews who believe in Zionism and support the Jewish exclusivist state, they also, of course, certainly reject your idea that could, if your advocacy prevails totally at any time in the future, could result at some point in an Islamic state in all of historic Palestine, which encompasses the present state of Israel. Presently, then, 5.2 million Jews reside in Israel. Not many, if any, Israeli Jews would accept your advocacy of an Islamic state. In the late 1970s, at a meeting in London organized by the Organization of the Islamic Conference, to which I was invited as a panelist, I said this to the Palestinian Islamic theologian Ismail al-Farouqi, who advocated an Islamic state for the whole Middle East, including Palestine, Israel. He answered that the only three choices for Jews in Palestine would be to leave, to accept the Islamic State, or to stay, fight, and then be expelled or killed. Now, before asking you to state if you would answer likewise, I wish to point out briefly, in addition, that an American scholar from Harvard, as you probably know, Samuel Huntington, espoused a theory a few years ago that there was a clash of civilizations between the West and Islam. Some other scholars agree with this theory. Some, like myself, argue that this theory is incorrect. Key advisors to President George W. Bush believe and advocate this theory. What you have said indicates to me that you believe this theory to be correct, even though you are on the Islamic side of the argument. If I am correct in my assumption, you are, I suggest, actually helping the advocacy of the Bush advisors, even though that is, of course, not your intent. Perhaps you would also comment upon this. Again, I make this comment respectfully but sincerely. Yesterday, you advocated serious debate and dialogue with non-Muslims. I also make my brief comment in that context and with that spirit. Admittedly, I am ready to pursue further discussion, debate, and dialogue with you, although, given your belief that you have the truth from God through Muhammad, I certainly do not think that I can shake you even to question your faith. And I have doubts that you will be able to convince me to believe differently than I do. Perhaps then the discussion will be useful only to the extent that we make sure we understand one another's positions and views correctly. Thank you.
I don't think I have to say anything about these comments except one. The alternatives for Jews or Christians or Hindus or Sikhs or an Islamic state, they are not only three, that either they leave or they become Muslims or they fight. No. I told you they can remain in Islamic state, they can remain Jews, they can remain Christians, they can remain Sikhs, they can remain Hindus. But the overall political socio-economic system will be Islamic. But you have the right to believe anything, you have the right to worship anything in any way you like. You have the authority to practice your own personal law. I have told you this.
They could stay.
Yes.
That's
definitely.
one option.
Definitely.
There are two others.
But they are not equal citizens.
May I? Have you?
Yes, I'm done.
Thank you. I think I have a couple of observations, questions, precisely on issues relating to the minority management in a state envisioned along the lines that you have mentioned. What I'm trying to figure out really is this, that is there, firstly, a critical mass attached or associated with this concept that the majority shall to declare a state, Islamic state, be 51%, or 99% or something like that? Is there some such critical mass associated with it?
I don't think there is
Because
any.
I want to then proceed from there, because if we take the position of 51-49, we take position of 50.1 and 49.9, I think we are in for a big trouble. And likewise, we are in a big trouble. In fact, at any point, at any stage of this curve, any stage, and I shall try and explain it to you how, that we take a situation of any hypothetical country where you have a certain percentage of people who are so-called minorities. They have a right to live. They have a right to work. They have a right to produce children. They have a right to feed them. And they have a right to tell them, hey, this is your God. They don't have a right to tell the others, this is my God. But the others have a right to tell them, this is my God and this is the God that is the true God, and therefore you better believe in it because that is my purpose and my mission. And now we are, I think, trying to create a different kind of situation here, firstly, that in terms of the cultural and religious identity of people, the so-called freedom really is in name, because the freedom essentially implies co-equality of some kind. Otherwise, it is no freedom, because if there are constraints on freedom, because it's a relationship of a transaction, and if it is not a transactional situation, I think really the persons are constrained. That's one part.